January 22nd, 2007, 12:07 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, San Diego, California. Inside the control tower at Lindbergh Field Airport, an air traffic controller named David Chen noticed something wrong with his screen. The blips representing incoming aircraft, flights carrying hundreds of passengers, began to flicker, then blur, then disappear completely. "Tower, this is approach control. Are you seeing this?" He was. Every controller in the room was staring at blank monitors, where, seconds ago, GPS-tracked aircraft should have been visible. At the same moment, 6 miles away at the Naval Medical Center, Dr. Sarah Martinez was mid-surgery when her pager went dead. Then every pager in the hospital stopped working. Emergency calls to doctors vanished into silence. In San Diego Harbor, the automatic traffic management system controlling dozens of commercial vessels and Navy ships shut down without warning. Ships that had been guided by precision GPS suddenly had no idea where they were in relation to each other. In one of the busiest ports in America. On the streets, cell phones lost signal. ATMs refused transactions. Bank systems failed. The entire city's invisible digital infrastructure collapsed. And out in the Pacific, something far worse was happening. 2 U.S. Navy ships conducting a routine training exercise had just triggered a cascade failure that would black out GPS across a 30-mile radius. But that's not the terrifying part. The terrifying part is what they discovered when the systems came back online. Something had been watching them in the darkness. Something that moved in ways that shouldn't be possible. This is the story of the day an entire fleet went dark. And what they encountered in those 6 minutes of silence. To understand what happened, you need to understand what the Navy was trying to do. In early January 2007, 2 Navy vessels in the port of San Diego were conducting a communications jamming exercise. The official designation was Training Exercise COMEX 74, a test of what happens when radio communications are disrupted during combat operations. The Cold War might have ended, but the threats hadn't. Every major military power was developing electronic warfare capabilities. Russia, China, North Korea. The ability to jam enemy communications could decide the outcome of modern naval combat. So the Navy practiced. They needed to know their ships could function when radios went silent, when GPS disappeared, when all the technology they relied on was stripped away. The exercise was simple. One ship would use a communications jammer to disrupt the second ship's systems. The crew of the target vessel would then demonstrate they could maintain operations using backup procedures, paper charts, celestial navigation, visual signals. Old-school seamanship. It was supposed to be contained, localized, a controlled test with minimal impact beyond the 2 ships involved. The technicians on the jamming vessel calibrated their equipment carefully. They were operating in the VHF and UHF bands, frequencies used for tactical military communications. Nothing that should affect civilian systems. At exactly 12:05 p.m., they activated the jammer. And immediately, they knew something had gone catastrophically wrong. The GPS receivers on the target ship didn't just lose signal. They went completely dark. No satellites, no backup systems, nothing. Within seconds, reports started flooding in from shore. The Naval Medical Center, the airport, the harbor traffic control, cell phone networks, GPS across the entire San Diego metropolitan area was down. What the Navy technicians didn't realize, what nobody had fully appreciated, was how many systems depended on GPS. Not for navigation, for timing. GPS satellites broadcast incredibly precise time signals from atomic clocks. Cell phone towers use those signals to synchronize with each other, allowing your phone to seamlessly hand off from tower to tower. ATMs use GPS timestamps to prevent fraud. Hospital paging systems use GPS for network coordination. When the Navy jammer disrupted GPS, it didn't just blind navigation systems. It broke time itself across the entire city. For 2 hours, San Diego operated in a digital void. Air traffic controllers reverted to radar and visual tracking. Doctors ran through hallways instead of using pagers. Ships in the harbor navigated by eye, praying they didn't collide in the congested waterway. But here's what the official reports don't tell you. There's a reason this incident is classified beyond the basic facts, a reason the Navy's after-action report was heavily redacted, a reason it took 3 days to discover the source of the jamming when dozens of Navy personnel knew exactly what had caused it. Because something else happened during those 2 hours. Something detected on the ship's sonar systems. Something that moved through the water in ways that violated every law of physics the Navy understood. Let me take you back to those 2 Navy ships, the ones conducting the exercise. When GPS went down, standard protocol was to immediately activate backup navigation systems. Inertial navigation, using gyroscopes and accelerometers to track position based on speed and direction. Dead reckoning, chart plotting. But there was a problem. Both ships were equipped with the AN/SQS-56 sonar system, hull-mounted active sonar designed to detect submarines. These systems operate independently of GPS. They use sound waves to map the underwater environment. And at 12:13 p.m., 6 minutes after GPS went dark, both ships' sonar operators detected contacts. Multiple contacts, submerged, fast-moving. The first report came from sonar technician second class Marcus Rivera aboard the jamming vessel. Con sonar. Multiple subsurface contacts bearing 270, range 3,000 yards. Contacts are, Jesus, they're fast, designating Master 1 through Master 6. 6 objects, moving at approximately 60 knots underwater. Let me put that in perspective. The fastest military submarines in the world, Russian Alpha-class boats, can hit maybe 45 knots submerged, and only for brief sprints. These contacts were maintaining 60 knots, continuously. Sonar con, confirm contact speed. Con, sonar, contacts now at 70 knots and accelerating. They're maneuvering independently. No formation. Request active sonar authorization. Active sonar was risky in a crowded harbor. You're essentially screaming underwater with sound waves powerful enough to potentially harm marine life. But the commanding officer authorized it. The sonar pulse went out. And what came back made no sense. The contacts weren't submarines. They weren't any recognizable underwater vehicle. The acoustic signatures didn't match anything in the Navy's database. No propeller cavitation, no machinery noise, no thermal signature. Just solid metallic returns moving at impossible speeds. And they were circling the ships. At 12:15 p.m., one of the contacts accelerated from 70 knots to over 120 knots in seconds. That kind of acceleration underwater should be physically impossible. The friction, the drag, the engineering required to generate that thrust without a massive propulsion system. Then, as suddenly as they appeared, the contacts dove. Straight down. The sonar operators tracked them descending at rates that would crush any known submarine. Past 1,000 feet, past 2,000 feet. Still accelerating. At approximately 3,500 feet depth, deeper than the sonar could reliably track, the contacts vanished. The time was 12:19 p.m. The anomaly had lasted exactly 6 minutes. At 12:21 p.m., the Navy technicians aboard the jamming vessel shut down their equipment. GPS signals began returning to normal. The city's digital infrastructure slowly came back online. And in the official report filed 3 days later, those 6 minutes weren't mentioned at all. Within hours of the incident, orders came down from naval intelligence. Classify everything related to the sonar contacts, isolate the acoustic data, restrict access to the after-action reports, and most importantly, do not discuss the underwater anomalies outside secure channels. The official story was simple. The Navy accidentally jammed GPS during a routine training exercise. A technical error, an oversight. Nobody's fault, but procedures would be reviewed and updated. The impact was exaggerated in some media reports. Air traffic control had backup systems and continued functioning normally. Cell phone disruptions were minor. The hospital paging system was down for about 30 minutes, not 2 hours. It was embarrassing, but manageable. A footnote in the history of GPS vulnerability. But the classified version told a different story. Commander Patricia Lawson, the senior officer overseeing both training vessels, filed a critic message, critical information report, directly to U.S. Pacific Fleet Headquarters within 2 hours of the incident. Critic messages are reserved for information of national security significance, requiring immediate attention at the highest levels. What was in that message remains classified to this day. What we know from whistleblowers and leaked documents is this: the sonar data from both ships was immediately seized by naval intelligence. The operators who detected the contacts were debriefed separately and ordered to sign non-disclosure agreements under threat of court-martial. The acoustic recordings were sent to the Navy's Underwater Sound Reference Division in Orlando, Florida, a facility dedicated to analyzing anomalous underwater phenomena. And then something unprecedented happened. A second incident. On January 24th, just 2 days later, 3 more Navy vessels conducting exercises off the coast of San Clemente Island reported similar sonar contacts. Fast-moving underwater objects, impossible acceleration, descending to depths beyond tracking. This time, there was no GPS jamming involved, no communications exercise, just routine operations, which meant the objects from January 22nd hadn't been drawn by the jamming signal. They'd been there all along. The GPS blackout had just forced the ships to rely on sonar, and finally detected them. How long had these things been in the water near U.S. Navy vessels without being noticed? For years, the San Diego incident was just an interesting footnote about GPS vulnerability, a cautionary tale about technological dependence. But in 2019, everything changed. The Pentagon officially acknowledged the existence of the UAP Task Force, Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena Task Force. Their mission: investigate reports of unidentified objects observed by military personnel. And in 2021, they released a preliminary report to Congress. The report analyzed 144 encounters between 2004 and 2021. Of those, 80 involved objects detected by multiple sensors: radar, electro-optical systems, and sonar. The report specifically mentioned that some UAPs demonstrated unusual movement patterns and the ability to operate in multiple environments: air, water, space. The term they used, transmedium, objects that could transition seamlessly between air and water without any observable change in performance. In 2020, leaked footage from the USS Omaha showed a spherical object descending into the Pacific Ocean off San Diego and disappearing beneath the surface. No wreckage, no debris, just gone. The objects detected in 2007 weren't isolated. They weren't unique. They were part of a pattern that had been ongoing for decades. Retired Navy sonar technicians have come forward anonymously to report similar encounters. Fast-moving underwater contacts that defy explanation. Objects tracked near nuclear submarines during deep-water operations. Acoustic anomalies detected in the Philippine Sea, the Norwegian Sea, the Gulf of Mexico. All classified. All buried in restricted databases. Dr. Kevin Knuth, a former NASA scientist and current professor of physics, has studied the UAP data. His conclusion? These objects represent technology that violates our understanding of propulsion and materials science. The speeds and accelerations described in these reports would require energy levels we can't produce with current technology, he's stated publicly. And the ability to move through water at those speeds without cavitation, without creating bubbles and drag, suggests materials and engineering we don't possess. But here's the most unsettling part. The objects detected in 2007 weren't aggressive. They didn't attack. They didn't interfere with ship operations beyond being observed. They were watching, circling the ships, observing the exercise. And when the GPS came back online, when the ships returned to normal operations, the objects left. Almost as if they were specifically interested in what happened when human technology failed. When our digital eyes went blind and we had to rely on older methods like sonar to see. So what really happened on January 22nd, 2007? The official answer, a GPS jamming incident caused by Navy training. A technical mishap. Nothing more. But the classified answer? The truth buried in restricted files. For 6 minutes, when San Diego's GPS went dark, and 2 Navy ships were forced to rely on sonar instead of satellites, they detected something that's been in the water all along. 6 objects, moving at impossible speeds, demonstrating technology decades or centuries beyond our capabilities. Operating in U.S. coastal waters, near one of the largest naval bases in America. And nobody knew they were there until our technology failed and we were forced to look differently. Think about what that means. GPS has been operational since the 1990s. For over 3 decades, the U.S. Navy has relied on satellite navigation instead of sonar for basic positioning. We've gotten lazy, comfortable. We assume we can see everything. But sonar operates differently. It hears what satellites can't see. And when we finally listened, really listened, we heard something that shouldn't exist. How many times has this happened? How many encounters were dismissed as equipment malfunctions or false contacts? How many sonar operators filed reports that were classified and forgotten? The ocean covers 71% of Earth's surface. We've explored less than 20% of it in detail. The average depth is over 12,000 feet, far beyond where most sonar can effectively operate. What's down there in the places we've never looked? What's been watching our ships, our submarines, our naval exercises for years without us ever knowing? And here's the question that keeps Navy analysts up at night. Why did the objects reveal themselves during the GPS blackout? Was it coincidence? Or were they studying what happens when our technology fails? Testing our backup systems? Learning our capabilities and vulnerabilities? Because if these objects are intelligently controlled, and the evidence strongly suggests they are, then that 6-minute encounter wasn't random. Exit was deliberate, a probe, an assessment. And if they were testing us in 2007, what have they learned since then? Today, the official documentation of the San Diego GPS jamming incident is publicly available. You can read the Coast Guard reports, the FAA statements, the technical analysis of what went wrong. What you can't read are the sonar logs from those 2 Navy ships. Those remain classified, buried in the same restricted databases that hold decades of similar encounters. The Navy has upgraded its procedures. GPS jamming exercises now require extensive coordination and notification. The incident led to improved protocols for protecting civilian infrastructure during military training. But nobody talks about the 6 minutes when the fleet went dark and discovered something had been in the water all along. In 2023, Congress held hearings on UAPs. Former Navy pilots testified about encounters with objects that moved impossibly fast. That transitioned between air and water. That seemed to demonstrate intelligence and interest in military operations. The Pentagon confirmed these encounters are real. They're documented. They're under investigation. But what they won't tell you is how long this has been happening. How many incidents have been classified. How many times our ships and submarines have detected these objects and filed reports that disappeared into classified vaults. The ocean is not empty. It's not conquered. It's not understood. And something down there, something with technology far beyond our own, has been watching us for a very long time. On January 22, 2007, for 6 minutes, the U.S. Navy stopped looking at satellites and started listening to the ocean. And the ocean answered back. The question isn't whether these objects exist. The Pentagon has confirmed they do. The question is, what do they want? And why, after all this time, are they making themselves known? If this story changed how you think about what's in our oceans, if you believe the Navy knows more than they're telling us, if you want to see more classified encounters brought to light, hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel, because there are more incidents like this, more sonar logs, more encounters buried in classified databases, more truths that powerful institutions don't want you to know. The Navy has been detecting these objects for decades, and they've been keeping it secret. But the truth is coming out, one leaked report at a time, and we're going to expose every single one.